joining us on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri urges for a speedy resolution to free the Lebanese servicemen held hostage by jihadist militants in Arsel. Health Minister Wael Abu Faour meets with the families of the abducted soldiers in Dahr al-Baydar and says ministers did not discuss the option of trading Islamist prisoners for captive servicemen during yesterday's cabinet meeting. And pilgrims mark the first day of the Muslim pilgrimage of Hajj in Saudi Arabia. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri has urged for a speedy resolution to free the Lebanese servicemen held hostage by jihadist militants on the northeast border. Hariri's message came during a message he delivered on the occasion of the upcoming Eid al-Adha holiday. He said, "Our joy in the Eid will not be complete before we see the kidnapped soldiers in the arms of their parents, and this is a responsibility worthy of national consensus and crucial decision regardless of the price." In his message to both Lebanese and Arabs, Hariri said he insisted on exchanging Eid greetings despite the wars, displacements and policies of tyranny and terrorism that threaten the homelands and only cause more destruction and extremism. Hariri reiterated the need to keep Lebanon neutral from regional conflicts. He says this can only be achieved through resorting to the authority of the state and supporting the Lebanese army and legitimate security agencies. Health Minister Wael Abu Faour has briefed the relatives of Arsal captives who are holding a sit-in on the eastern Dahr al-Baydar road on cabinet discussions regarding the abduction ordeal. He says ministers did not discuss the option of trading Islamist prisoners for captive servicemen during yesterday's cabinet meeting, but it mandated Prime Minister Tamam Slam to follow up on negotiations through a Qatari intermediary. He said the dialogue was positive and the ministers are unanimous on the need to liberate the soldiers through all available means, and that is a priority issue. He also pleaded with families to end their more than week-long blockade of the road, citing the negative repercussions it has on people's lives and businesses. Prime Minister Tamam Slam has convened with U.S. Ambassador Mr. David Hale at the Grand Sarai, with talks focusing on the general situation in Lebanon and the region. MP Jean Ougassapian and MP Bassem Cheb also met with Salam. The gatherers discussed holding the conference for Blue Peace in Lebanon on March the 22nd. Blue Peace is an international organization that focuses on water resources and usability. Education Minister Mr. Lies Boussab says private school teachers deserve the same wage hike as their public sector colleagues in the controversial salary scale bill which Parliament refrained from passing earlier this week. Speaking at the end of a meeting with a delegation from the Association of Private School Teachers, Boussab stressed that equality and justice should be respected and there should be no discrimination between private and public sector teachers. The minister also assured parents that the salary adjustment for the teachers would not lead to a rise in school fees. He said the bill will take into account the teachers' rights as well as education costs. Boussab underscored the difficulties his ministry faced in accommodating Syrian refugee children in public schools, stressing that priority was for Lebanese students. He said refugee children will be allowed to register in public schools after Eid al-Adha once Lebanese students' registration is completed, and urged Lebanese parents who had not registered their children to do so as soon as possible. The Lebanese army says it has discovered a barrel packed with 50 kilos of explosives near a military checkpoint near Arsal. An army unit beefed up security measures in and around the area of Ras al-Sarish on the periphery of Arsal after discovering that the barrel was filled with explosive chemicals. Security sources say the barrel contained paint thinner, which may detonate under certain conditions. ISIS fighters have entered the Syrian town of Kobani near the Turkish border. Heavy clashes erupted early this morning between Kurdish militiamen and ISIS jihadists who have besieged a key Syrian town near the Kurdish border. ISIS militants in Syria have advanced on Kobani, known as Ain al-Arab in Arabic, despite U.S. airstrikes in support of Kurdish fighters. Kurds have expressed anger and disappointment over Ankara's policy against ISIS, accusing the government of turning a blind eye to the group and refusing to allow Turkish Kurds to cross the border and fight in Syria. Meanwhile, Turkish Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu said Turkey will do whatever it can to prevent the Syrian Kurdish town of Kobani falling to jihadists after the Turkish parliament gave the green light for military action. And coming up next, a United Nations report outlines possible war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by Islamists in Iraq. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Pilgrims have marked the first day of the Muslim pilgrimage of Hajj in Saudi Arabia with a journey to Al-Rahma mountain around Mount Arafat, where the Prophet Muhammad delivered his last sermon to pray for God's forgiveness. The kingdom expects nearly 3 million pilgrims in Mecca for this year's Hajj, one of the world's biggest displays of mass religious devotion, including 1.4 million from abroad. The 5-day Hajj marks sites that Islamic tradition says the Prophet Ibrahim, biblical patriarch Abraham, visited in Mecca, and that Prophet Muhammad established as a pilgrim route 14 centuries ago after removing pagan idols from Mecca. Iraqi military forces backed by Shia volunteer fighters have recaptured 30 villages from ISIL east of Baghdad. Reporters on the ground say the army was trying to build offensive chains in Diyala province. Islamic State militants advanced into Diyala province in mid-June, taking control of Saadiya and Jalawa town, as well as several other villages around the Himreen mountains, which have long been a hideout for militants. The United Nations says Islamist insurgents in Iraq have carried out mass executions, abducted women and girls as sex slaves, and used child soldiers in what may amount to systematic war crimes that demand prosecution. The UN report, based on 500 interviews with witnesses, also said Iraqi government airstrikes on the Sunni Muslim militants had caused significant civilian deaths by hitting villages, a school and hospitals in violation of international law.
This is really a devastating report. It covers just 9 weeks and such a huge array of appalling human rights abuses, mostly by ISIL. These include rape, they include murder, summary executions, sometimes of very large numbers of people, abductions, recruitment of children, making children into fighters, destruction of mosques, of churches, other religious buildings. It's a really devastating litany of horrendous abuses affecting many, many thousands of people. Clearly, and the report makes this very clear, many war crimes and crimes against humanity being carried out. And for this reason, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein, is calling on Iraq to put the situation directly in front of the International Criminal Court as soon as possible.
Australia's cabinet has authorized military airstrikes on the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant Group on Iraqi territory and the deployment of Special Forces troops to combat the fighters. Prime Minister Tony Abbott said the deployment to Iraq could be quite lengthy, certainly months rather than weeks. He added the decision to intervene came at the request of the Iraqi government and that it was in Australia's national interest. Australia recently heightened its security alert, citing threat attacks by ISIL sympathizers on its soil. ISIL has seized large swaths of territory in Iraq and neighboring Syria. The UN has accused the group of carrying out a staggering array of human rights abuses that may amount to war crimes, attacking civilians and committing targeted executions, abductions and rape. And now for some news around the world in brief. British Prime Minister David Cameron has made a surprise visit to Afghanistan and held talks with newly inaugurated Afghan President Ashraf Ghani as NATO troops are ending their long war against the Taliban. Speaking at a joint press conference, Cameron outlined some of what he called Britain's accomplishments in Afghanistan, mainly to build an Afghanistan capable of looking after its own security without the need of a large number of foreign troops. Demonstrators calling for electoral reform have scuffled with opponents in two of Hong Kong's busiest shopping districts, with police stepping in to try to calm the chaos. Around 200 demonstrators were confronted by a larger group that started to dismantle barricades in Mong Kok in an apparent backlash against the demonstrations, which have brought parts of the city to a standstill for days. 4 people close to the first person diagnosed with Ebola in the United States have been quarantined in a Dallas apartment as health officials widen their research for people who had direct or indirect contact with him. U.S. health officials say 12 to 18 people had direct contact with the patient who flew to Texas from Liberia via Brussels and Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, and they in turn had contact with scores of others. And now for all the horror movie lovers out there, there's a new demon in town and she's hiding among the toys. Soon after pregnant Mia receives Annabelle, a gift from her husband, for a growing doll collection, The couple endure a terrifying break-in, and then strange things start happening. Annabelle, officially out in the United States theaters, kicks off October's Halloween offerings at the box office. Enjoy the trailer.
Cherish is the word I use to describe.
Okay, close your eyes. I was waiting on this until the baby, but open your eyes.
Oh my God, John!
That's the one, right?
You know how long I've been looking?
I know.
There, she fits right in. John, wake up.
What's it? Is it the baby?
No, next door. I heard a scream. I think something's wrong.
Stay here. Let's check it out.
I like your dolls. My husband's coming back. Take whatever you want. Just get out.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri urges for a speedy resolution to free the Lebanese servicemen held hostage by jihadist militants in Al-Sal. Health Minister Wael Abu Faoud meets with the families of the abducted soldiers in Dahr al-Baydar and says ministers did not discuss the option of trading Islamist prisoners for captive servicemen during yesterday's cabinet meeting. And pilgrims mark the first day of the Muslim pilgrimage of Hajj in Saudi Arabia. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again tomorrow for more updates. Take care.